Welcome to Connect This. I'm excited because I learned that I have a true friend on this show this week. And after we get through introductions, I'll reveal who it is. First of all, two of the people I saw this week, so good candidates. Brian Snider's back. Welcome.
Glad to be here, Chris. It was great seeing you this week. I know you're traveling so much, so it's just hard to find you. It's like finding Waldo, and we found you. So it was great seeing you this week.
And one of the things that we can tell people is now Mr. It's Always Feasible is a part of Connect Humanity, or working with Connect Humanity in some capacity now.
Yes, happy to be part of their awesome team. I am the managing director of broadband implementation, and just as the job description, or that's my job description, I'm going to take ideas and implement them into actual connectivity. So enjoying working with Connect Humanity and what they're continuing to do. So glad to be a part of their team.
Excellent. You're going to be with us for the show. We're going to be going through a bunch of stuff, but I saw you in LA as part of a really great event on community broadband. Also there was Kim McKinley. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for letting me be here. And it was okay to see you in LA, Chris. Good to see you, Brian. And all I need to say is, can you do an event there next time? Can you make it warm in LA? Because isn't that the benefit of going to LA? It's not cold.
I was wearing short sleeves and I sure loved it. But then by the end of the Timberwolves game on Wednesday night, I guess, it got pretty chilly. Joshua Edmonds and I were sitting outside in a crowded bar, and we're just sort of like ready to like watch the game and just waiting for it to end so we could leave. It was chilly. Yeah. It's a humid chilly. That's the issue. 60 degrees and humid is worse than 60 degrees and dry. But yep. we'll get out of the local weather forecast and get over to Doug Dawson. Welcome to the show.
I'm just sitting here wondering which one of these two people is not your friend.
One of them demonstrated a true act of friendship that I'll outline after I introduce Travis Carter from UTOPIA Fiber. Welcome.
Good day, Mr. Mitchell. It's really obvious, isn't it? There's three of us that are always here and somebody new. So and we've done this 95 times and we've never heard about any of us being his friend. So I don't know. I mean, I'm not the smartest bulb in the room, but
I don't want to build it up.
My money's on Brian.
I don't want to build it up too much, but someone went above and beyond. So
it better not have been McKinley, because
today we're going to be talking about BEAD, and finally I'm getting a sense of how this program works in one crucial aspect that apparently I was sadly confused on. We're going to have Alexis Schrubbe joining us for that segment. We're going to be talking about Travis and USI have their own ACP replacement that we'll be talking about. While we were in California, a big bill passed the assembly about digital discrimination. We'll talk briefly about that and some of the lobbying around it. In Minnesota here, we've had two big things that we're going to spend a lot of time on. The lesser one is the one that I'm more excited about, which is Minnesota has removed all of the barriers to community networks, and that is really exciting. The third state to do so in 4 years. And then what we're going to spend more time on is the thing I'm unhappy about, something that can be improved, which is some of the labor requirements that Minnesota has attached to the BEAD program. And that's going to foreshadow a conversation that I just recorded. We'll release on Tuesday with some local providers here in Minnesota, some of the companies that have long been doing important work in rural areas. So we're going to get into greater detail in the Community Broadband Bits podcast, but we'll talk a little bit about that. And then with the time that's left, we'll talk about how open access is hard. And some people are just figuring that out maybe, but there's a lot of confusion around it. But those are the things we'll be talking about. We have a telecom peekaboo ready. So this is one where my wife and I were walking to the local soccer match, and we saw this pole. And I don't know if you can, if you got really good eyes, maybe you can see what it is. But I was trying to figure out exactly what's going on here, because the left to me looks like a fiber network and the right to me looks like coax. And I was just trying to figure out if anyone knew what exactly was happening up there.
Doug?
If that was like a place where maybe the Comcast fiber network was like junctioned into coax or what?
Well, normally that's what I would expect, but there's not a fiber node there exactly. So not unless they have a really tiny fiber node there.
Yeah. So you just, I mean, go ahead, Travis.
Well, I mean, it's obvious. It's definitely a fiber handoff onto the coax network.
Yeah. But that's
Okay,
usually the node box is bigger than that one on the right.
Yeah, you see the little silver box there. That's where they're doing it. Yeah.
So that is the CMTS? Is that right?
Well, yeah, Doug, that's the right term.
No, CMTS is the thing in the head end. This is called a node. So
Okay.
it's just an optical to light, translator. But usually they're a little larger than that. But maybe they have a newer, smaller version.
Well, we do have we did get the mid split, so maybe they replaced some of that stuff.
Could be. Yeah.
So it looks like it looks like a splice case there on the left with
the far left
stack that then runs into a snowshoe, and then it comes over to. I'm not a cable guy, but whatever their cable to fiber converter is or whatever, and then it seems to go off from there. So and then above that is power, obviously.
Yep. Yeah. Try not to go up there and touch it.
And I think Ruben said it's a cedar pole, which is what is.
It's also a little unusual that there wouldn't be multiple cables coming out of the coax end, but maybe it splits right after that. So
yeah, do you see the little junction box there? It looks like there's a service tap there.
Yeah, it sure
must be going out to a home. So
probably I think a business right there.
Okay, our business. Yep.
Okay.
I think that's what you got, Mr. Mitchell.
Brian, did you ever mess with this stuff, or you just got in late enough and just focused on the fiber? You never had to worry about it.
Oh no, I messed with this way too much. Back when we were doing the AT&T builds, and it was a lot of actual. We did fiber to back then. It was fiber to the VRADs, and then it was just converting pot lines off of that. So, been a part of this, and but I would not have been able to quickly identify that was a cedar pole. I'm very, very impressed.
Yeah, no, I had no idea. I just assumed it was wood. I'm good at wood versus metal. That's my specialty. Can we go to the next? Let's get into the humiliation round. Kim, go ahead and take it away.
Oh, it's me who's not your friend? Oh, well, see, we were at this conference and they were showing us some equipment, but we know that Christopher Mitchell doesn't know how to work, but he was definitely learning how to supervise here. Really good supervision skills we saw. Just staring at them, ordering them around, as you know, Travis.
I didn't have my clipboard, but I brought a notebook.
Mm-hmm. Do we have the other picture that I sent? That one is my favorite, of him getting really down to really make sure he understands what's happening.
Yeah, you can tell Roger left at this point too. He's like, what are you
he
doing,
lost his
Chris?
companion.
Always look at the boots.
Yeah.
see who works there, right? Yep.
I was just documenting this for you, Chris.
Those guys are legit, and they'll come up again, because those guys who are standing there, I was talking with them about the path that they had gone into from joining the crew and then eventually getting in the seat of the directional borer there. So that'll come up in the Minnesota discussion again. But yeah, I had to, it was interesting. They had the different the head of the drill on, and they were demonstrating how it spun around and stuff. So I got real close, and I must not have annoyed them too much because they didn't try to hit me with it. So that was an improvement over past actions.
Yeah, but they're not looking so happy with you either. They're not even looking at you. They're looking at everybody else but you.
I don't know what you're talking about. When I walked away, they seemed real happy. All right. So the answer to the surprise question of who was a true act of friendship is Kim McKinley, who came up to me after I'd been presenting next to Gigi Sohn for a while, in which I kept standing up to talk to make sure people could see me. Kim came up and said, "I have a question for you, but first of all, your fly is open." I would have gone half the rest of the day.
I was like, I've got to state one thing. First of all, your fly is open. You need to correct that. Second of all, here's my question. But yes, you were.
That's a true act of friendship there. So I appreciated that.
Yeah, that is something above and beyond for sure, or below. I'm sorry.
Kim did that same thing to me down in Metro Connect, actually. In a sea of men, the most beautiful woman in the thing came up and gave me a hug. And I'm like, fellas, that's how I roll, right? So she's done us all a solid, right?
All right,
I'm here for Brian and Doug coming down the road, whatever nice thing I do for you at some point.
Let's bring in Alexis, because Alexis is who I called this morning when I was like, I don't understand. she's on via a satellite link.
I love it.
I answered the red phone.
Right.
With Chris Mitchell has a direct line to me on this red phone. And irony of ironies, you want to talk about, I'm such a telecommunications dork that I have this old Western Electric phone, and I love sharing this because if you look real close, it says property of Wisconsin Telco, not for sale, in those old days when this was considered part of infrastructure. We were joking earlier about Doug sounding like he was on a phone, so I just wanted to pull this out because you called me on it this morning, and here I am. I materialized.
Yeah. I had such a foundational question. I did not want Christine on my staff to know that I have no idea how anything works. So I appreciate you taking that call.
Cat's out of the bag.
There I am in Montana at the Tribal Broadband Boot Camp, and we have two people there from the state who are focused on the Montana program. And they keep talking about how they have to make sure that they are addressing every single unserved home. And I was like, I don't think that's how it works. I had thought that the way that I read it is that, and I want to use a hypothetical example. If a state had 120,000 unserved locations that they had after the challenges and everything else, they've agreed there's 120,000 unserved homes. They need to figure out how to divide the money up. So at the high cost threshold, they're going to not be doing fiber anymore. And my sense was that if they got to a point where they were like, look, we could do 80,000 homes with fiber, and then we can do 20,000 homes with wireless, and we're left with 20,000 homes and we don't have anything and we're out of money and that's the best we can do, that would be acceptable. But I'm now understanding that no, in fact, they have to figure out how to connect all 120,000 homes in this case, which to me is just really stupid, but also explains why the Biden administration continues to perpetuate this myth that everyone's going to get service. So Alexis, set me straight.
Yeah, I'm going to invoke a quote from an industry expert. You may or may not know him. He's got a really popular blog called Pots and Pans. And he opens one of his recent posts with, one of the most interesting rules in the BEAD legislation is that broadband needs to be offered to every unserved location in the country, not 98%, not 99%, but all of them. So indeed, that is absolutely correct. This goal is universal service. Absolutely, full stop.
It's terrible. It's terrible. It's just like we're just going to get stuck with the highest, like the last 1% is going to like screw over 20 or 30% because we're going to spend so much on that last 1% is what I'm worried about.
It's worse than that. I guarantee
it couldn't be worse than that, Doug. That's as worse as it could get.
In Minneapolis, there's probably 3,000 or 4,000 unserved locations on the map. Whether they're really unserved. And
many more that aren't on the map, probably.
But nobody's going to be trying to get to those, indeed. But the broadband office has to solve those somehow. So it's crazy. It's crazy.
For reasons we'll talk about later, and we'll talk about that, Ruben's question, I think, toward the end. We'll find a way to fit that in. But we'll talk later about why Travis is certainly not going to go after BEAD dollars, even if it was available. But did you all understand that from the beginning, that they were required? Yes. My thought was they could only spend money on unserved until they run out. And now that I know they have to spend all the money, like even if they can't, it's really a recipe for misusing a lot of the money, I think.
Yeah, sorry, Doug, go ahead.
No, it's a recipe for disaster. It's not going to work. Yeah. So.
Alexis, what were you going to say?
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I mean, really, this is like a very bizarre and extremely expensive showdown of Settlers of Catan. I mean, if you think about it, they gamified this system through layering of highly technical data products. So we have rounds of challenge processes. And with each layer of requirements and engagement, we are adding burdens to state broadband offices that often are a one pizza shop, right? One pizza per all the human beings in the shop. And we've known this for quite some time. Obviously, there's funding to scale, but the shot clock is so short, the turnaround time to find the labor to hurry up and do that and take advantage of this in a way that's thoughtful and propositive has completely slipped through our fingers, right? So this gamification of this actually stretches across geographic areas. These laws manifest across geographies in really strange ways. And there's no uniformity, despite the fact that we say universal service, everybody online. Our country is so vast and the challenges faced by different states are so diverse that the rules, norms, and pressures that are on each state are, we're going to see 56 different manifestations of how this game that was intended to lower barriers to entry and diffuse broadband shake out.
Mm-hmm. Brian, do you have is that your understanding from the beginning? Or are you shocked now? He can't even unmute himself. He's so stunned.
He's stunned. He is stunned.
Look at his eyes, guys. I mean, his eyes are getting bigger by the moment.
Yeah, see, I finally found the mute button, so I'm gaining
How's
on
the
that.
game of solitaire going?
But no, I'm still just trying to wrap my head around what's going on, because it seems like it's clear as mud every day as we move towards this. But I was actually under the same impression as you, Chris, when we were coming into this. So this has been actually educational for me. So I appreciate this.
But like New Mexico has like so many locations and that are so high cost, and like now they're going to not be, they're not going to be doing permanent good solutions for more places so that they can get out to the most remote areas that frankly are where I will fight to say that they should get LEO. Not forever, maybe, but for now. Like, Kim, are you?
I'm aware of a ghost town in New Mexico that was completely abandoned for 70 or 80 years. 3 or 4 people moved in there to make it a tourist area. So they now live there. And those little dots are now on the map, and they're at least 60 miles from anything. I mean, they're now on the BEAD map. It's like, oh wow. There's a whole lot of that stuff around. Yeah.
Piggybacking off of Doug's point, this is the thing. This is the thing about this gamification. If a beaver dam, a log, a train, or some such other thing that is not really a broadband serviceable location. I mean, I love beavers. I think that beavers are one of the most fascinating species. They definitely deserve fiber. But those dots on the map, if they are there and they are missed in the state challenge process, in any type of protest or communication between NTIA and that state, that dot has to be served. That is part of the legislation. That's part of the law.
Well, fortunately, the government knows when to ignore its laws when it's convenient for it.
I think that's the point, right? Like, this might be in the law, this might be what it's supposed to be, but is this what's actually going to happen? I doubt it. I doubt that anybody's ever going to really enforce it. I doubt any of it is going to come to fruition, but that's just my simple point over here.
Right, but we're in this situation where, and I would go back to New Mexico, where there's enough money to like make a good dent out of the problem, but not if you have to stretch it so thin to where you are then, I'm assuming, and this is where I'm just making an assumption, but in the end, some number of people are going to be getting a low Earth orbit satellite solution, right? I mean, it's going to cost like $75,000-$80,000 to do the cheap thing to some of these homes in California. No one knows?
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Alexis.
No, I was just going to say, going back to the game metaphor, there's another layer on this, and that reverts back to the states having a lot of control on how they're making decisions on awarding project areas. A lot of states are holding back the publication of Volume 2 if they are empowered to strategically, because once that Volume 2 is approved, the shot clock is running, and you've got that year to ensure that all of your BSLs are in a contract. So all of the tricky details of what triggers a high cost location, potentially, some states are shielding that until they get those, non-high cost locations served. all the secrets are in volume 2, and we'll see a bumpy landscape of what project areas look like. It seems like the trend in this present moment can be a couple different delineations. First and foremost, socially constructed areas. So areas
right. So I want to interrupt you for 1 second. So what you're about to describe is that states have to like try to make sure that there's a bidder for every available location.
Yes.
Some have set up hexagons. Different consultants that are working with the states have different preferred models, and you're about to describe some of those.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, I take it for granted that people don't have bead tattooed on the inside of their eyelids like I unfortunately do right now. But yeah, no, that's it. That's exactly
Alexa,
right.
I was going to go get it done later today, so you won't be the only one.
Yeah, I mean, we'll flip our eyelids up like fourth graders and take pictures of that later. That's going to be amazing on LinkedIn. But no, yeah, that's exactly right, Chris. It depends state to state how these project areas are awarded, and hexagons seem to be the it girl right now. Hexagons are so hexy in this moment, and a lot of states are pushing towards universal service within that hexagon. So, and they're playing games, and there might be fun little rules, caveats, one-ups, and side quests within awarding those project areas. And back to my original comment, we've got socially constructed geographies. We have topography and geographically constructed areas. And then, of course, our favorite shape in broadband, the hexagon. But watch those places that have hexagons, because a lot of them are pushing for bidders to serve every single BSL within that hexagon. So the area itself is carved out. If you want that hexagon, you have to serve every single location within that hexagon, which, I mean, anybody who's been in this field long enough to have one of these telephones knows that in rural areas, there are long-standing social, business, and government boundaries that may actually influence how a network manifests in the real world. And furthermore, for folks who have not been on the build and run side of things, or on the infrastructure grant side of things, a lot of infrastructure grants that go to ISPs will award some locations over here, a little sprinkle of locations over here, a little sprinkle of locations over here. So we're fundamentally changing the way that we're expecting ISPs to respond.
Right. And so when you're saying socially constructed, for people who weren't in political science with me, what we're talking about is that, for instance, like, you might have a tribe that has boundaries that go along a river. Other tribes will have boundaries that just stop in the middle of a field. And so a hexagon, you'd want to have it perfectly inside have multiple hexagons within the reservation, and none that are half and half, because that is an awkward situation to try to resolve. Doug, you look like you're moving forward.
Wow, Chris, that you said somebody could have been in your social studies class. I'm just baffled by that, but that's.
It took me more than 20 years.
Doug.
It took me more than 20 years to pay off the loans. It made a notice in my head.
Well, the trouble is hexagons are also impractical because they don't look at where the roads go. So there could be two different east-west roads to a hexagon that have no connectors for 30 miles. Like, how the heck am I supposed to do that?
Welcome to Kentucky, West Virginia, and a lot of Colorado.
Correct. And so it's like this, this just is, it's crazy to draw that. Some places are worse. Georgia, as far as I understand, is still sticking to you have to do the whole county. Nobody wants them. They may get no bidders. I mean, and then what are they going to do? Because their shot clock starts. I mean, there's a lot of ISPs saying they are, I'm talking about big ISPs, like Charter just announced it's not going to go to a lot of states. Because once they look at those rules, they're going to go, no, I'll take my money to another state. What happens if nobody bids on it?
Well, that's where my understanding is. That's where the state office starts whining and dining. That's like all expected to be part of the process, I think. We only have a couple minutes left on it. So, Alexis, hit us with your last great take.
Oh, gosh. What's my last great take? Too many. I think one of the big challenges that I see, and you guys are going to talk about this later, is there are layers of regulation at the state and local level that could death by 1,000 cuts, unfortunately, this challenge that's before state broadband offices. And I think that once again, in my long history of studying this space, it seems like in the United States, we're super reactionary, and we put forth these good policies, and we then 20 years later go, oh gosh, I guess we didn't really see that coming. But we kind of saw this coming with this one. This crowd, y'all, the folks I hang out with, have definitely added a lot of critique and warning and raising of flags. But we're here, we're standing in the thick of it, and good human beings and good people are impacted by this. So, when you guys get into that weeds of the death by 1,000 cuts and some of those regulations and barriers that do actually stop good, small, local providers, community-owned networks, etc., I would just say my takeaway is this is hard. This is confusing. I mean, Chris Mitchell didn't even know that this was intended to have universal service. Have conversations with as many human beings as possible and get as much information as possible from trusted friends. Network as much as you can. If you are find yourself in a boat where, oh geez, I didn't anticipate that getting cones in my street was going to add another $30,000 to this project. So have those conversations early, now, and as much as humanly possible, because it's a game. We're trapped in it. We got to play it if we want to play. The rules are shifting underneath our feet, and the more conversations that we have about it, the better.
All right, Alexis with the Internet Equity Initiative in Chicago. Thank you so much. Love the prop. Also love that thing. Must be like 60 or more years old if it was because that was when you still had to rent it and you could not purchase it.
I am a 400-year-old vampire.
Excellent. Travis, did you have any reactions to this? That
phone's from 1980. I recognize it.
What in the world were you talking about? Is this still BEAD?
Yes.
Yes. Yep.
Isn't that done yet?
It hasn't even gotten started, Travis.
No, and Travis,
we've been talking about that since like episode 4.
You're gonna be asking that question, and we're still not gonna be done with it. So no.
Okay, I was just curious. And by the way, I liked her because you know what? I have a red phone too, and I'm gonna bring it in for next show.
Okay,
so I can show my red phone off. Yes.
Alexis is very sassy, and if people are trying to figure out how to get on the show, knowledgeable and sassiness are very helpful.
Yeah, but I've got 92 words I have to Google what they mean now, though. She's obviously highly educated. So,
Brian,
okay, I have a question.
Step up?
Hold on,
Kim. I want Brian to step up the sassiness today. So.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, I couldn't even find the unmute button, so I don't know how much I can be sassy from that.
I'm going to send you a foot pedal.
Well, my point is, what are you trying to say about us, Chris? Just asking if you have to be sassy to get on the show. And we're the regulars.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. Like you're all well. Let's not debate that. Travis, did you have any reaction to that aside from the fact that it's still BEAD?
I don't really. Since we don't qualify, I hate to say I don't pay too much attention, but it's just I think by episode 9,472 we might have our first BEAD customer hooked up. So I'm excited for the journey, everyone.
Yeah. Brian, do you have the same sense that like this has just been going on forever and ever and ever? I mean, you're actually, been working with different folks and alongside folks that are involved in this.
Oh yeah, I feel like it feels like you never have a solid answer. And actually, Alexis, that was great in what she did in describing that. And actually, I have a question back to Doug based on one of the things that he said. And obviously, I don't know if we're going to have the answer for this either, but if folks don't apply for certain areas and we're required to have 100%, then is that just going to delay the BEAD funding being allocated to everybody else because we have to have 100% until those other areas are actually applied for, I guess? And we might not, might not have the answer for it, but maybe just feedback.
Well, some states are actually, and Illinois is a good example. Illinois is tackling the highest cost places first. And only after they have gotten those all lined up are they going to tackle the rest. The trouble with that is somebody's not going to take the grant until they know if they win both pieces. So they're going to do that. They're going to get you supposedly signed up for the high cost. And then if you don't win the other, you're going to go, never mind, I don't want that after all. It's a nightmare for the providers. And most places are going after the regular stuff first. I don't see how they do this because remember, she said something very important, 1 year shot clock. to get them under contract. I've seen them take 6 to 9 months to get a contract negotiated. So how are they going to do this? So they're not going to meet their timelines.
This is one of those things that is just unnecessarily centrally managed, and it's this classic issue that I've run into over the years, and it's quite common on the left, although it happens a lot on the right too, in terms of when people come from either more politically conservative or liberal backgrounds. And it's this idea that like, oh, we need like someone to figure out how this all fits together to do 100%. And rather than recognizing if we just do a hell of a good job on 80% of the solution and like leave ourselves, a path for then tackling the 20% that's left over, we will be in a much better position than if we try to engineer 100% of the solution from the start. And I don't think, in all of human history, it doesn't feel like anyone learns this lesson. Kim? Well,
I actually had a call about this earlier today, and this is some of the fundamental problems, right? You need some of these areas that don't qualify for BEAD for providers to get into some of these other areas. They have to make financial sense in the long term for operations and not just the short term to build them. And I think that's where the disconnect is, right? A broadband office they're not going to get somebody in the middle of nowhere because there's no providers that are going to who are going to build new providers go into those areas. And second of all, so this money's going to go to the current providers who still haven't kept on promises that they've gotten money from years ago too. So it's just another round of governmental funding that might just go to waste. I know Travis is shocked by that comment.
No. Travis, I want to come back to you for a second, if you don't mind. I want to follow up on Kim's comment, and I want to specifically have Brian and Doug tell me if I'm going crazy here. But like, this is where I actually would say, to some extent, it's a real fault of the electric cooperatives that have not done anything. The electric cooperatives are the best entity suited for resolving this issue. The federal government and the states should have done a better job of making it enticing and easier for them to get into it. But the fact that more than half of the electric cooperatives still refuse to take part in what is obviously in their exact DNA of bringing rural infrastructure on freaking poles to people in these areas, it's a real failure of the management and the boards of those organizations, who are terrified at the prospect of actually doing something different that their parents, who were also on the board, didn't do. Am I overreacting there? Because to me, that's the biggest issue that would resolve most of this stuff.
One, you are crazy. But two, you're absolutely right. The ones who didn't do it, if you've ever gone and visited a lot of electric co-ops, some of them, the board members average 85 years old, and they have and a lot of the people who manage them, who do the actual running, are very, very conservative and don't want to make waves. And so they just cannot be talked into it because they don't see the sense in broadband. It takes somebody has to talk them into it, and it didn't happen. And then when they hear how hard it is, they really backed off. They didn't chase RDOF because RDOF was terrible. They should not have chased RDOF, but they should be chasing BEAD. But now you can't chase BEAD because let's go back to your tribal example. What if the defined service areas don't match the co-op boundary? They do not want to serve people outside the co-op.
Many of them don't.
This is a real mess. They've just made a mess out of this. So, yeah.
Brian, did you have any reaction to that?
No, I agree. I think if they're not looking at doing it themselves, they should be trying to find the right partners to go do it, I guess, from that side. And they are the ones that are going to, they've done it once before. It might have been, 100 years ago, but, from that side, it's not any different right now from what they were doing from that side. You're putting lines on poles and you can find the right partners to do it. I guess going back to even the BEAD funding, that's one thing that Connect Humanity is really working on right now. One, we're working on an Appalachia broadband fund where we're looking at areas across the Appalachia areas that can help support the funding where BEAD's not going to be able to work. Or if what we're talking about issues get delayed and rolled on, there could be funding that we're able to help get into some of these areas. And that's where I think some of the philanthropic and nonprofit plays are going to have to come from that scenario, to like what you mentioned earlier, Chris, about the last 20% and things like that. Like that's going to have to be met somehow. And if the co-ops aren't doing it, maybe there's a way for like the way Connect Humanity's been thinking about it. We can bring it to the co-ops to help them complete this work the right way, but they're still going to be the ones that have to kind of agree to it. So it's going to still be an uphill battle from that side.
Yeah,
Travis,
you put your finger on it earlier, Chris, because you said that states could have made this easier. The NTIA should have just sent the money to the states 2.5 years ago and said, you have to serve everybody, go figure out how to do it. And they would have walked out to the co-ops, sat at a table and said, if I give you 32 million bucks, will you do this? And they would have said yes, because that would have been easy. No strings. I'm going to give you the money. You guaranteed to build, sign a contract. We're done. That's not what happened. So, yeah.
Travis, and that's where we get back to. I mean, I just do think on many different issues, there's this idea that like very smart people can figure out how to orchestrate a solution that will then touch tens of millions of people. And there's just no AI even that can handle that amount of variables and everything else and variation from group to group. And this is, I think, I'm just going to go off in a second in a way that Travis will appreciate, because it's someone who was alive during the Woodrow Wilson era, which is, Hayek and the road to serfdom and the role and the Hayek's general work about the importance of information and how markets work and collecting that. And there's too many people who think that they can set the rules from above and then micromanage everything. And that's the opposite way we should be doing it. Travis, did you forget your point yet, or should I keep rambling?
No, I was just curious because this week, out of the dusty history, has come a topic we haven't heard from in a while, and I didn't know if it was related to BEAD or not, but Toronto Wireless, I've heard 3 or 4 times this week now again.
Yeah, I mean, how else are you going to get high capacity wireless out to these areas? You got to use Toronto. No,
I'm just wondering, but it certainly isn't low cost. So it's $100 a month for a Toronto connection out in these rural areas. So I'm just wondering if that's going to fill in a lot of these connection gaps that we're talking about.
And you wonder what happens in year 5 then, right?
Well, you run around and maybe there's BEAD 3 by then, where we actually hook them up.
Yeah,
there's an awful lot of places where the wireless doesn't work. A lot of Appalachia, I live there, but a lot of places it would surprise you. I just looked at a county in Illinois. Everyone thinks Midwest is a great place for it. The number one farming crop in that particular county is lumber trees. Everybody, these aren't pine trees that you can get the signal through. These are big old fat lumber trees.
That's what I'm talking about. That's what exactly what I'm talking about. There is too much variation for people to set these rules from DC and then work with state offices. I mean, there's variations within the counties, and there's 3,000 counties. So, okay. We're going to talk about this forever if we don't talk about how Travis is solving all of the problems of Minneapolis for low income with your very own ACP service.
Okay, so question for the group. Is ACP trademarked or copyrighted, or can I use the term? Perfect.
I would think you could use it, but I don't know that I would recommend it as a good marketing idea. Kim?
I would agree with Christopher Mitchell for once. I don't know if I would use it.
We spent all that time and money, promoting it. So
I was just talking to a woman who she's from a small foundation. They call it Internet for All, and I was like, I love the name. I was actually thinking about how, like, my initiative, the Community Broadband Networks Initiative, we should be the Internet for All, but then no one will ever be able to find us because that space is so taken over by others for internet searches.
Travis, just change program to plan, and then you still got the acronym all set up and ready to go.
Boom! There we go.
Make a little change. There we go. Yeah. Done and done. Yeah.
Look at that. That's solving the problem. So no, anyways, it was very disappointing. Obviously, as we all know, we went through the ACP, and I on this show said it was one of the only government program I really enjoyed. And guess what? It didn't renew. So we had a fair number of people that were left high and dry. So instead of trying to disconnect them, we just came out with a $25 and $35 package. $25 gets 500 by 500. 35 gets you gig by gig. It includes a router, and sadly, we have to tax you on the router. So I wanted it to be just 25 or 35, but it's going to be like $25.47, which is kind of disappointing. But
is there a qualification?
Yeah, we copied the same qualifications, and you have to requalify every 12 months. So in month 10, we'll have an email that goes out to you. You just requalify, and you can be on it forever.
How do you do that internally? You have someone who is verifying documents, or
Yeah,
what?
yep, yeah. You have to call into the call center, send in. And what's ironic, so I interviewed a bunch of people that are on the qualifying programs. They all know how to do it. You know, they're like, oh, you just need the form, and they just send us a picture from their phone, and they're on. So anyone in the home that qualifies for it, we'll hook that house up. So we'll see. We're about to start on Monday, so hopefully, you know, I think it's the only solution. Chris, you and I have been going around as long as the BEAD program has been around, trying to come up with a solution. It was just time to finally kind of just do it.
Well, I think that is the solution for the single family home. You're also going to do it MDUs as well, but the solution for the apartment buildings is a bulk arrangement, I think, with the owner, where there's a fee per unit and everyone gets that high quality product. I think that's something else that you're working on with some folks, and that's
no, I mean, if we can do it in a bulk configuration, it obviously helps, makes it easier. But some buildings we're just going to pre-qualify. So if you happen to live in a certain building, you don't even need to provide any paperwork to us. Everybody in the building will qualify. So yeah, I'll be able to report back here in a month or two and see what our uptake has been. But the key thing, though, we thought was we need to control the experience. So give them a tri-band proper router. What we didn't want to do is have some 2.4 router that their cousin's neighbor's best friend bought at a garage sale in 1995. And now it's our problem that the internet's not working. So you got to sell them, or got to give them the router.
Yep.
So that's it. And we're going to change program to plan. Brian, my man, this is a good show. So yeah.
No, good for y'all, Travis. That's awesome though. That's great.
I'm hoping it'll resonate with people, right? We'll see. You know, we're going to do a mailing. We're going to I'm trying to engage organizations locally. We'll see.
I know that, Travis, you're expanding still, but I'm curious, Brian, as you're someone who, when you were at Lit Communities, you were expanding to new areas. There's quite a difference, I think, between doing that when you've been in a market for 16 years and you have an established base versus when you're going in brand new. You just want to talk to that for a second?
Yeah, it's because the first part of it, like when ACP was in place, you really had to educate them on it from that side, because the actual homeowner needed to apply. And a lot of folks thought like, well, you're just going to automatically qualify, right? So it was really an educational piece around it at first to make sure that they were actually signing up, and you're working with local community advocates as well to try to get it out there as much as you can. So when you're expanding, it's more about the education process, because you haven't been in the community as long as some others have from that side. But like I've heard some really good ideas and interesting ideas. Now this might not work from some of the bigger ISPs because of how so many I guess subscribers that they have and things like that. But I've heard where employees are talking about actually contributing to a low income home $30 per month to cover the monthly fee of what is being lost right now. And I think that's a cool effort in itself in regards to just figuring out, and just like what Travis is doing, it's figuring out just different solutions in order to get it done. And if we can get it done without ACP, that just goes to show like we can cover this in a certain way. And I think it's cool to hear the different solutions that are being thought about and how they're being handled. But it is a completely different process when you're expanding, and it's really more about the educational side of it for sure.
Now I want to move on. Any last thoughts, Kim or Doug in particular?
I just wanted to say, can we just say it's dead instead of it being in the news that it might be refunded? It's still trying to get into bills. It's all of this, because I think that there's some confusion and there's some hope out there from some people that it could get refunded. And I just don't think that that is realistic. And then to Brian's point, if that's just saying it's dead, can we just move on with other solutions instead of hoping?
I just think that if you think that anything is predictable with the current politics, then I'd like some of that hopium, because I'm more of a nihilist, where it's just like, I don't like anything that nothing matters. Like, it's just like I have no idea how to make a prediction right now.
But Kim, do you think some folks are using that as an excuse too, to where they're like, well, we're going to delay and see what happens, but then because they know they're never going to potentially do anything with it?
It could be too, right? I mean, it's politics at its finest. I think that's happening up there, and they're spewing it because they can have the political credit that they're trying to keep it alive, and they're not. So it's Washington D.C. Come on, do we expect anything else from the folks in there?
All right, so we have a great news. Minnesota, the governor has signed the bill. The legislature pushed through. It removes the barriers to community networks. So previously, ever since 1915, if you wanted to build or buy a telephone exchange, you had to have a supermajority vote in Minnesota as a public entity. And now that is not the case. Cities can make up their own minds. And then there was some other specific language to building a fiber optic network where no private provider could be offering a comparable service. And that is now gone. So people have more ability to decide locally if they would like to make this investment without having to go through extra hurdles. I'm really excited. That puts us down to about 16 states that have meaningful barriers against municipal broadband. 4 states, I said 3 earlier, but Colorado also removed their barrier. It's just that it wasn't that strong of a barrier, but it's a pretty good movement over the past 4 years to get rid of barriers to investment. So I'm excited about it. Anyone else?
I would just say that the Minnesota barriers were in the light category. They were not a prohibition, and there's a number of cities there who have gone through it. So, but it's good to be gone. Now there's 0 barriers, and that's always better. So, yeah.
Yeah,
Chris, it's about time to listen to you, I guess, is the real.
Yeah, I think
right?
it's completely Chris. I think we can all just agree on this. So.
I think we can. So the funny thing, I feel deeply weird about it because like this is something that I learned that was happening. I did not push it. And then there was not a lot of fight around it. And I was like, I'm just going to keep my big mouth shut because I'm afraid that if I draw attention to it, it might be more of a fight. So the only thing I did was stay quiet and other people got the work done. Zach Stevenson, a rep in Minnesota, was excited about moving this forward. The governor was excited about it. And so like, I thank his staff.
But why are they excited about it? Why does this have their attention? Was there something that was going on? Are there communities who want to do municipal broadband that were prohibited? Like, what was the backstory a little bit?
I believe Wilmer in Kandiyohi County is building an open access network, and Duluth was building a network with rescue plan funds, specifically in the Lincoln Park neighborhood, which is low income. So there was some movement here and there, and they were concerned about the language. I mean, to Doug's point, there was never a huge barrier, but it was enough that many communities were intimidated by it and didn't want to get into it that, it cast more of a shadow than in Colorado, where when you have 100+ cities all getting past the barrier, there's a sense of, wow, what are we worried about? But in Minnesota, in particular, Monticello passed the vote with 74%, and then I would say fell on its face a bit. They had some real issues with their partnership. They had a lot of stress, in particular from the incumbents offering some of the most amazing deals in the upper Midwest for internet access 2009, 2010. And other cities saw what Monticello went through and they said, oh, we don't want to do that. So that's something that was related to the barriers. And there was a lawsuit that really hurt Monticello and set them back around the barriers. So like it gets really muddy and cloudy as to exactly what the barriers are versus the perception around the barriers. And Doug knows, he worked on Monticello.
Indeed, I did. It was an ugly story. Yes, from beginning to end. Yes.
But now it's a partnership with a firm that like it's going well. People are well served. They still have really good prices because they have more competition than I have here. Eventually Travis will get over here and get me some price competition and better service.
Higher prices, Mr. Mitchell. Higher prices.
I will pay more for your service. Be happy to
higher prices only for you.
Exactly.
Sure. So also in Minnesota, I think we don't know if this one's been signed by the governor or not yet, but there's an expectation that he will, is what we believe to be the most stringent labor requirements around specifically prevailing wage and training requirements for those receiving BEAD dollars. Doug, you're leaning forward, which makes me think that you've looked into this.
Yeah, I'm very familiar with the law. I don't know if it's been signed yet either, but now there's a lot of states that require prevailing wage. Illinois has always done that, so that's purely a prevailing wage state. But But they had all these really crazy other rules that every single person who touches the fiber had to get a certain certification. And it's
in
clearly
directional boring.
in directional boring. It's clearly a bill aimed at keeping union jobs versus non-union jobs. I mean, that's clearly who backed it. We know who's backed it. What's amazing is they got it through, but what they're going to do is they're going to drive. I think you're probably ready to tell us that since you met with some ISPs. I'm sure it's going to drive some more ISPs out of not applying for BEAD. It's just one more barrier. So, yeah.
Well, in particular, that certification issue, I think, may stop all. I mean, I don't know how, you need, I don't know, like 15% of the crew to be certified normally, like 10% of a crew to be certified, Travis? Like, how many of the guys?
You don't need any of your crew to be certified.
Oh, sure. So this is it, right? In Los Angeles, and I don't know if the people I was talking to at the Bureau of Street Lighting are certified or what that certification process was. And in fact, in Minnesota, we don't even know what that is because the Department of Industry and Labor has to figure out what that's going to look like. But what the people I talked to in Los Angeles and the people I've talked to with tribal ISPs all say the same thing, basically, which is they started doing the work. They started with a job that was less skilled. They saw what was happening and they were like, hey, could I learn how to do that? And over a period of months, like 3 months, typically, they would have started to learn how to do it and then eventually be in the driver's seat. And it seems like that is a path that's worked. The small ISPs here working with the Minnesota Telecom Association have a safety program and things like that they already participate in.
Yeah, they also required that every person who does locating had to have that certification.
Yeah, so Travis, I mean, like, for people who don't know, what does that do to your cost, would you expect?
Well, it sounds like another rate increase for our customers.
Right.
This is where, I mean, every layer of more bureaucracy, more audits, more government this, more government that just means the end user pays more. I mean, it'll just get passed on by us and everybody else.
Well, so Travis, my reaction to that is that I feel like there's also some real benefits that could come from this. So my understanding is, and as Doug said, I mean, I don't know for sure because I don't pay that close attention to the legislature, but I think Communication Workers of America and other organized labor, I think we're very in favor of this. But they were responding to a real issue, which again we talk a little bit about in the show for Community Broadband Bits on Tuesday next week, which is that there are companies that are bringing in contractors from far away who are engaging in unsafe practices, who are probably being very undercompensated to build these private equity funded networks that are intended to be built quickly, shoddily, and flipped to ignorant investors before anyone realized what a crap network they bought. And so there is a real problem that I feel like they're being responded to, but attaching it to BEAD is the 100% wrong way to fix it, I think.
Those networks they're talking about are not BEAD networks.
Exactly. None of those companies are going to go for BEAD dollars is my expectation.
Those are urban networks. Yeah. So that's not going to fix anything.
But Travis, have you heard that? I mean, like, 'cause this is something I've heard other people talking about.
Well, I mean, the reality of the people that work, especially in underground, is it's dangerous. So most of the people I have met take it very seriously. You have weekly safety meetings. It really all comes down to the proper locating and proper training. And really, you can't legislate that. You actually said it correctly. You start out at the bottom of the labor force and you work your way up. And it isn't this. There's not a certification or a piece of paper or even a classroom that is going to benefit experience in the field. So what we look for are people that have years and years and years of experience, and they can demand a price. But younger people can't demand that price. They have to earn their stripes. So, again, just more rules, looking for a problem that generally does not exist.
So you haven't heard stories about
millions and millions of feet go in the ground every single day, and we're not blowing everybody up all over the country. I mean, this is another. This is another union kind of thing where you have non-union workers out there that are making aren't making the same, aren't taking 7 coffee breaks a day, and they're getting the job done, and it upsets them, just like it does when they picket buildings and all the other things they do, unnecessarily. We're just trying to get the job done without charging people $300 a month for their internet.
I mean, so one thing I just wanted to say is, I have seen union workers work very hard, and I don't want to agree with all of your criticisms. My sense of the safety issue is not so much the safety of blowing up a gas line as worker safety is an issue. And my understanding is there are workman comp and other similar issues related to this where people are getting hurt.
I have more workman's comp claims over people that do low voltage work than we do underground. There's workman comp claims all the time, car accidents. I mean, this is just, again, somebody looking for a problem that doesn't really exist, in my mind. I mean, if you really want to talk about the problem out there, it's the lack of locators, and it's especially around gas service. That's the real
Or it's the
problem.
quickness of the locating right now. It's because locating is getting pushed out because of not enough people who are doing that job right now.
A real problem, a lot of the gas services, they don't even know where they're at. So, I mean, these are the real problems that are in our industry.
So Travis, you bring a hell of a lot of experience in Minneapolis and some rural areas of the upper Midwest. Brian, you've worked all over the place on this stuff. How does this resonate with you?
What Travis just said is spot on. Like one of the biggest issues we have, no matter where we go, is locating gas lines. And most of the infrastructure owners do not know where their stuff is at, and then they tell you can't go build in this area because and at first they're trying to cover up that they have bad records and things like that at first, but it's a issue all across the place, and no matter where you're building, is that you're going to have to basically go out there and pothole, work with the gas company to do better locates. And then my frustration falls actually then on the gas companies as well too, because they don't have enough resources to go out there and locate for you. And then they don't allow you to bring in your contractors that are certified to locate gas lines to actually contract to help speed that up. So then you're limited at how much you can build. And you've got customers that are now frustrated because you've had to push back their access a week or 2 weeks or a month, because not anything that you had to do with, but because you're dealing with existing utilities. So Travis nailed it on the head at the end. I mean, it is spot on in regards to existing utilities and where they're located. 90% of it's gas.
Kim?
So this is interesting because we actually just had this conversation, not on the safety side, but even like on the locating side. We didn't go into a business complex where we probably had 15 or so customers because that complex is like, I'm not going to locate your stuff. Like we could build and all of it's at risk of getting damaged. And we're like, we're not going to take the risk to build into some of these areas, right? There's all kinds of issues regarding, locating, but that's a huge issue and out there. I know it's not where this conversation started on unions, but it's kind of gone down this way.
No, I mean, but this is what we want this show to be. We want this show to reflect the actual experiences of people that are out building stuff. So I appreciate that. I worry a little bit about generalizations where, if you see something negative, it sticks in your head. Whereas if you see 10 positive things, it doesn't come back to you immediately. But I think the issue on locating is true. One of the people I talked to recently was talking about them pursuing ground penetrating radar to have available in order to try to help them move along in some of the more built out areas. And I don't know if that's something that anyone has done or what the limitations of that are.
Yeah, we tried that, boy. You think, what's that ultrasound, like looking for, babies in the womb? It's 1,000 times worse than that. Right.
Wow. Okay.
Trying to figure out what's under there, right?
I think babies are probably easier to find in the womb. It's
well, no, you know how
they what you're looking for.
No, that's what he's saying though. But
yeah,
anyone who's been through that, like I will say, like, like you're just like, wow, is it in there somewhere? And like this looks like technology from like 100 years ago.
No, I'm talking about like finding a little anomaly in the fetus. That's
right.
That's what it looks like on these things. And in fairness, we hire a lot of union crews, and they're great people. I'm just being facetious from the standpoint that why put more rules and more burdens on a problem that really isn't the problem out there? And one or two bad apples doesn't mean the other 1,000 are not doing a good job. So
well, and then
and
the other issue.
We'll get the final perspective here. There's no gas lines where they're building BEAD.
Oh, that's true. These
people use propane. This is in the middle of nowhere. That's where BEAD's going. There's no gas lines.
And what And what Doug just did is
There's
drop
no
the mic
water.
on this whole
There's no-
conversation.
There's no water lines there. They don't have city water. They don't have gas. It's like, what the hell are we talking about here?
Well, so the other issue then is prevailing wage, which is something that I've talked with many people about ever since I learned what Davis-Bacon was back after BTOP. And whether you're talking about a municipal provider, cooperative provider, small for-profit, or even a larger for-profit, although I think the larger for-profits are the ones that I would be keeping an eye on myself. But like all of them are required in rural areas to blow up their pay scale because the federal government and the states don't actually know what the prevailing wage is in many of these areas for relevant occupations. And also the fact that what Travis just said earlier too, I think is useful. I haven't seen in the prevailing wage guidelines any sort of guideline for seniority. And so, it treats as though everyone who does this work is all at the same level, when in fact, a person that's doing it for 1 year is quite different than a person that's been doing it for 20. But one of the people I talked to, it was basically like, they want me to pay people like electricians, but they're not electricians. And my response was, also, if I was an electrician, I'd be pretty frustrated that someone coming in to do low voltage work with no training was getting paid like an electrician.
Well, no, and I know a lot of contractors who will not participate in BEAD because they don't want to have some of their employees making more than other employees. So they are just staying out of it. They're going, I will take non-BEAD work. I won't touch these BEAD grants. So.
And that's where, my recommendation is to those who are like, Chris, I'm usually with you, but like here you sound like a Ronald Reagan acolyte that I don't like, is that I think that we need to have a high standard for government programs. It's not enough to have good intent. If you want to do prevailing wage and you cannot measure it, you shouldn't do prevailing wage because you are actually making things worse and spending money inefficiently. If you want to do prevailing wage, then we should figure out a way to actually do it or scrap it. But what I'm seeing, and whether it's in Illinois, Minnesota, Wisconsin, or the other places where I've talked with a lot of people about this, is that the prevailing wage, according to the government, just happens to be like 50% to 100% to 175% more than what anyone actually gets paid for doing this work. So
yeah, it's the union wages in the largest city, and then they apply that to the rural areas. It makes no sense. Now, most states for BEAD are not requiring prevailing wage. They've gotten over that issue. So, yep.
Okay. So, we have two things left and only enough time to do one of them. So open access is hard, or California's digital discrimination bill passes the assembly.
Oh,
I think we should do California. Oh, we can do that. We can do open access.
No, I think Kim, I think we should do California. We'll do open access when we have more time to dig into it.
Yeah, let's do that while we can really go for it. Good point.
All right. So Brian, did you see the bill passed while we were there?
I did, and I saw a lot of people walking around on their phones during that time. So it was like, it seemed like chaotic stress was going on as we're trying to do this conference. So it was very entertaining day.
So AT&T, Comcast, Charter showed up in Sacramento with 30 lobbyists, which I think is on the order of 3-4 times as many as they normally have. Apparently, they had one for every moderate Dem, and those are the people that were at stake. And California is a little bit closer, although it still has to get through the Senate and the governor. But California may put teeth into digital discrimination, which is to say the federal government, the Federal Communications Commission, established what digital discrimination is, where companies would be building a network in one area, but then not serving another. And there's a lot of issues around that definition. But the state of California is looking at actually having sanctions for those who are found to have engaged in that practice. There are a lot of off-ramps for companies that have a legitimate reason for having not invested in certain neighborhoods. But it's an interesting situation where the big cable and telephone companies are deeply concerned about this.
Oh, they should. And in legal terms, what the issue is it's called disparate discrimination. You just look at it, and to you or me, a person with common sense is like, yeah, you discriminated against people. That's the test in California, versus intentional discrimination, where you would have to prove that the company intended to discriminate, which you can only do if you got a whistleblower from inside the company.
Yeah, you'd have to have like emails or phone transcripts or something.
Right. So the ISPs only want intentional discrimination, because it'll never, ever come to a light unless there's a whistleblower. And they're very careful never to use those words. But disparate discrimination is everywhere, especially you're in a great place. LA is so full of good examples of discrimination that they should be worried. So,
Travis, despite the fact that I may disagree with you, why don't you share your concerns about this? Because I'd be shocked if you don't have them.
I now understand why almost 1 million people moved out of California. I guess it's hard to do business there, huh?
Well, so, I mean, if you're going to use that stat, I'll just say I looked into that. 60,000 people moved out of California to Texas. 30,000 people moved from Texas back to California. It's not as significant as some people say.
It's still a net loss, though. So,
yeah,
here's the deal. You make it hard for people to do business, they're not going to do business.
But, okay, let me make that point. This is a great point, because I hear that. This is something that I don't know as much about broadband, but I can say that people often do, like, business groups that are like want less regulation, talk about how what states are best at for small businesses, and they'll pick the low regulation states, Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas maybe, and yet those states have very few small businesses. Vermont has the most small businesses, and they have a pretty rough regulatory climate. Right. And so I think there's a host of factors that go into that, but I would say that I don't want to see unnecessary regulations that aren't doing anything, and that's what does concern me about California and some other places like where we see that concern brought up. So I'll agree with you and disagree with you in part.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, I mean, the density in Los Angeles would be amazing to build a competitive fiber network. Why hasn't anyone done it?
Yeah, well, I think it's a very good question. It's not because of a lack of donut shops, I'll tell you that.
Well, no, I mean, I don't know the answer.
Right. No, and for people that aren't familiar, like it is dense, but it's also dense in the way that like almost everything is like a triplex. And so you're passing people every time you walk anywhere. Yep. There's just tons of people everywhere. There's businesses everywhere. I mean, like there's all, and Charter Spectrum is the only one that's available in most of these places.
So my assumption is, and again, I don't know, I've never looked at building in California, is it's probably not easy.
I think it is quite expensive.
It's probably very expensive. And you have an incumbent there that already has a built-out network, and they can play with pricing and just control the environment. And the more regulations the government pours on, the least. I mean, there won't be any competition. There'll be somebody maybe that has 4 or 5 wireless customers in some area, but that'll be about it.
Kim, you must have looked at the regulations as part of the contracting work that you're doing with the rural counties.
It's gonna be hard. It's gonna be hard. California is not easy to build in. And what I was going to say to Travis's point is that if people are investing into this business right now, what you're seeing a lot of investment going here, you're not seeing it go into the states like California and more highly regulated states. You're seeing them go into states who are much friendlier to businesses. So you're seeing them in a lot of the Southeast states that are happening. There's some other reasons behind that as well, but California is a beast, and they can't regulate their way out of this problem, I guess is my point. They cannot regulate their way out of digital discrimination and think it's really going to work long term.
Look, I'm just gonna say that like Sci-Fi's announced like 150 billion cities that they're building networks in. They've broken ground in a few, but the first one was in California. So there you go.
Was it the first one in the Northeast, or Fullerton. Was it Fullerton? Fullerton.
Is it okay?
But
we're not going to talk about Sci-Fi. I want to ask Brian, did you ever look at building in California?
So not from providing internet service. California was never on our plan, and it was just basically marked off. But I did contractor work for AT&T and Verizon in California, and the price differences and the cost to build out there, that is the big difference. It's like your materials are more expensive, your labor is more expensive. You're like, even so, in just a comparison, what we were getting paid as a subcontractor to do the work for these providers was 2 times to 3 times as much as it was in other states that we were doing it in. But we had to have that in order to just pay the folks locally to be able to do the work. So I think that's where the bigger challenge is from that side. It's like that was one of the main reasons we didn't look to go build in some of these areas. And like Travis was saying before, the density is great, but like even the cost to build in those dense areas still drives your cost per household pass up so much, it almost still becomes not feasible in certain areas.
Yeah, but you always say it's always feasible. You can't change your brand on this show, Brian. Come on.
Well, it's still feasible.
Yeah, that's a really good catch, because it's always feasible. So
Well, I think, and I would defend Brian by saying he's right. Even in a very high cost place, you got to push the timeline out. You got to be more creative. You got to find ways to make it happen. I think that's exactly the point. But the question is, what is happening that drives permitting off and up so high and all these other things? So, any last comments on that? I mean, I'm excited to see what happens in California. I think it's a good conversation. I don't know. I mean, I guess let me see if anyone wants to react to this, which is that I feel for the fact that we have we're pretending to have a market system when we don't have the ability to actually have a lot of competition. And so where there is competition, like we're going to require charter, like charge more in areas where there's competition because they're charging so much in the low income areas. It is really hard to untangle this from a regulatory solution. And I feel for companies who are in both competitive markets and non-competitive markets. Of course, the prices are going to be lower in competitive markets. Of course, the prices where the competitive markets are going to be in the areas where there's more wealth, although not extreme wealth, as Travis has noted. We're talking about upper middle income areas and middle income areas more than rich areas. And so ultimately, my concern with this, and Shana and I have talked about it, Shana, who's driving a lot of this effort in California, I feel like this is worth pursuing, but ultimately the solution, I think, involves public and nonprofit investment focused on poverty rather than just trying to figure out how we require Charter Spectrum and AT&T to rip people off less in some areas.
Well, there's the last issue, and then we'll probably be done with this. The regulators have to want to enforce this. I don't see them getting ready to jump in these big fights. If you accuse Charter of discrimination in a neighborhood in LA, that's going to be a 7 or 8 year regulatory fight. They're bringing all the lawyers. I mean, you're not going to get a quick resolution of this. And then they're going to appeal it. And so, I don't know that California has a whole lot of regulatory laws they don't enforce. So that they're feel-good laws, but enforcing is hard. So.
Yeah. And I think that's the theme that we're coming back to again and again. It is one thing to have a good idea. It is another thing to put it into practice. And it is a third thing for it to have the impact that you want.
Yes.
Well said, Mr. Mitchell.
That you could have made a speech out of that. I'm a little disappointed. Yeah.
Well, I'm just looking forward to Travis sending me a text in a few hours about how I'm wrong about everything.
No. It always comes back to the basic question: how can we provide a high quality product in a dense urban area at a low cost? Mm-hmm. It always comes back to that.
And I think you've showed how one can do it without government support, and it can be done.
Yeah, but it's slow though. It's not overnight.
Slow, yeah, and it might not be possible anymore. I mean, like that's the thing. I mean, there's something I've been wanting to bug you about, Travis, which is that I find it interesting that you blame the government for high interest rates, but I've never heard you praise the government for the low interest rates that you grew up your business during.
Well, I just want those sweet, sweet rates back. So, the sweet taste of that low interest would really help. And you know what? We could get more network out in front of more people, and I'll have more data coming up on our affordable connectivity plan, which kudos to Brian is now the official name, coming up here in the next few weeks, because maybe nobody wants it. We'll see.
However, he would like some regulation that would pull down rates. He has pro-rate regulations.
All right, guys, I got to run. I got to take Peaches to the vet. See you guys.
Thank you all.
Well done, guys.
It's been a fun show. Kim, did you want to say anything? All right.
I got nothing to say.
We'll probably be back in about 2 weeks. I'm going to be home for 2 weeks straight, and it's going to be awesome. I'm so excited after almost 3.5 weeks on the road nonstop. It's awesome. And sleeping in my own bed is nice. So Jordan, we're almost out. Thank you, Jordan, for producing the show. This has been another fun episode of Connect This.